Welcome to USA Global TV and Radio, where our mission is to provide education, entertainment, hope, and inspiration. USA Global TV and Radio connects you with experts and audiences all around the world every single day to help you succeed in business and to live a richer life. Visit us at usaglobaltv.com to learn about career and life-changing training and mentoring programs like the Listening Mentor. Subscribe to our newsletter to stay informed about our special programs and offers. Discover how you can become a guest on one of our shows or a host or producer of a USA Global TV and Radio show of your very own. That's USA Global TV and Radio, where the doctor is always in.
Hello, USA Global TV watchers and listeners. I am so happy to be back with you guys. It is wonderful. Today, of course, we are back with Talking Heads, and I am your host, Mariska du Preez, for this show. Of course, Dr. Jacqueline is never far away, luckily, because she's in control of all the buttons. And you guys are also never far away as you are joining us via subscription, or maybe today is the day that you found this show quite by accident, which we also, of course, welcome. So welcome, everyone. I really am looking forward to today's topic. Yes, I know it doesn't give a lot away in our description for today. We are still looking at our self-awareness. So if this is the very first show that you are tuning into, there's a couple more that we already did around self-awareness and elements and areas in which we can improve our self-awareness, how it looks like, and especially how we bring that into our leadership journey. And today, you might be wondering, what is this roadblock I am talking about? And yes, it is a quite significant roadblock, especially when we look at our self-awareness, because you can go and ask anybody in your vicinity, and typically they will proclaim that they are very self-aware. We do get those individuals here and there that don't necessarily think they are self-aware, and in general we have also found that those are the guys that are either working on it, or they might have resolved to the fact that they don't want to work on it, which, hey, we are human, and that is our choice. But do I think about myself as maybe self-aware? And possibly I'm not as self-aware as I think. So what is this roadblock I'm talking about? Well, the roadblock is literally our blind spots. It's the things we do not know about ourselves. And that is really pieces that can detrimentally impact our self-awareness. Because some of these things are things that other people notice about us, but we don't. So somebody might say, for instance, I go to work and I feel I'm a whiz at this specific task. I'm the most creative person in the world. I can hit this thing out, no problem whatsoever. But when we speak to my colleagues, they'll be like, we're not so sure about that. It doesn't always work so well. Or, yeah, it's not necessarily only her ideas that comes up. So when we brainstorm, it's sort of a overpowering that I have in the conversation versus a collaborative discussion, whatever the case might be. So the way I show up and my impact in the world and what I think I do not actually align properly. They don't mesh at all. So sometimes they mesh a little, and sometimes they are worlds apart, literally worlds apart. And that is then a blind spot for us because it's something we think we do really well, and technically we don't, because that's not the experience everybody else has around us. So that's where the blind spots come into effect. Now, what might cause blind spots like this? Elements that we can think about around blind spots is we tend to have blind spots, especially in areas where we have a specific experience base, which we bring to the table, and not being open to other perspectives. So I know for a lot of people, especially in the workplace, we've been hearing this thing about diversity and inclusion. What is that really about? It's really about bringing in other perspectives into our space. And it is not about our color or any of those sort of things that sometimes we have a tendency to focus on more. It's really about our reference base. So thinking about the people in my network and the reference base they have and how much that differs from mine. Because the more their reference base differ, the more likely it is that they are going to see something that I don't. And, i.e., blind spot. They see it, I don't see it. For me, I'm so steeped in it. It's literally the story about asking a fish, hey, do you know what's water? It won't. It's breathing it, literally, every single day. It's part of its environment. It's so entrenched in the system that it doesn't see that it is in water. And that's what happens to us as well. We get so caught up in this little bubble of our own, we don't necessarily see all the other possible bubbles and that we are in a bubble. So other people, other perspectives helps us to appreciate the bubble that we are in. And sometimes we want to change the bubble and sometimes we don't. The thing is, if we can at least see it, we can decide whether we want to change it or not. And that is what self-awareness is really about. It is understanding how we like things, how we interact with things, what brings us joy and what does not, as well as how it is that we show up. How are we being in the world around us? How are we impacting the other people and things and spaces that we interact with? Understanding that is part of our self-awareness. Now, if there are certain things because of our little bubble that we are in that we don't even see, we don't see the impact maybe of what we are doing or the impact of what we are saying, then that is a blind spot for us because we have no idea what the impact is. So we can't really change it. We don't see the side of the bubble in that area. And that is where this blind spot piece comes into our self-awareness and why it is also a roadblock. Because typically, for most people, we are not very fond of feedback. And the reason why we are not very fond of feedback for most human beings is around the fact that it feels like it is struggling with, wrestling with that inner identity piece of ourselves. It can feel personal. And who likes to go, well, I want to protect that personal inside squishy piece, right? It's not something that we typically walk around with and open up our chest wide and sort of go, okay, yeah, you just take a stab at it, it's fine. We don't like it. It's emotionally traumatizing. So for most people, we don't want the feedback because we are afraid of it damaging our inner softer self. Now, the unfortunate side effect of that is if we do not get the feedback, we can also not grow and improve the way that we are actually interacting and being in the world, and even improve the way that we relate to things in the world. So really understanding ourselves better, not only from an internal perspective, also from the external, how other people experience us perspective, gives us a better way of interacting with intention. So being more self-aware and getting that feedback helps us to be more intentional around how it is that we want to interact with others. And as leaders, because yes, that is the group that I mainly work with, this is important. Now, there's a caveat, because we are all leaders. I want that to sink in. We literally lead in different areas of our life. Now, if you are a mom and you're at home with the kids, you might think, but I don't lead anyone. Of course you do. You lead the next generation. It's not the schools, it's not the teachers. Yes, they have an impact on it too. They lead in their space, and you give them that very fundamental first base of what it looks like to lead. We are all leaders in all areas of our life. By being a human being, we are leading a life. So even if you just look at that piece, leading your own life, nobody is forcing us to do anything, that any choices that we make. It might feel like that from time to time, but literally the choice, the decision to do it or not do it, is still our own. It is always our own. So we are leading in so many different areas, and that is why it is so, so important for us to understand and be aware of what it is that works for us as a human being, as an individual, as well as how that relates into our wider system. Because, yes, as a species, we are very much connected. We are all a social species, even for my introverts. I know it doesn't always feel like we are a social species, and we can get away with not seeing people for ages. We still need them. So we are still a social species. We still need some human interaction, and there's great little things that happen in our body when we have those interactions. For us, it will look a little bit different in different interactions because we like things differently. And that is what our self-awareness is all about. The thing is, if we have these blind spots, we can really not build on it. So we might think, oh, well, I know all the reasons why I do this thing. And if I don't do anything about it, am I really self-aware? Because a part of that self-awareness is not only the understanding of the why I do what I do, so the reasons behind it. It is also making a choice to either do it or not do it, and not blame anybody else for it, but taking responsibilities for our own actions and what we create in the world. I know Simon Sinek typically says in loads of his talks that the one person that is common in all my failed relationships is me. So the one person that can change that experience is me. And that's something that we need to take into consideration for ourselves. And this is, again, where the blind spots come in. If we keep blaming other people for the experience we are having, we need to really go and have a look at that, because we are creating that experience. And we might say, no, but it's this external circumstance, and it's the recession, and it's this thing, and it's that thing. Yes, it might impact it, but it's not the be-all and end-all of it. How we experience it, that's up to us. How we interact with it and the reactions we have is up to us. And that changes the outcome. So I do know that within our other training material, when you go on the website, there are quite a few different places where you can go and have a look at me unpacking some of this a little more. And I didn't want to do that today because all the resources are already available for you. So I wanted to bring in a different element to this blind spot area. And the piece that I want to bring in is that when we have an experience, looking from where we are today influences that experience that we are having. And if we change our perspective, when we change the way we see it, when we change the way we think about it, and when we change the way we be, so our own being, we change the experience we have. And that to me is the real important piece around why we want to get feedback. We want to have great experiences and live a life worth living on this planet. Some of us want to make big impacts. Some of us are happy with having smaller impacts. If we have a happy, healthy family, we are happy. We feel like we have lived a life worth living. For other people, they want to help the world, change it in some grand way. And that for them feels like a life worth living. And we can only do that when we know what it is that we need for ourselves. So understanding what it means for us to have a life worth living. What does that even look like? How does that translate for us? And how do we then go about creating this life? Because that's the place where all this impact stuff comes in, where all this blind spot potentially stuff comes in, when we have other people that we are working with, or other people in the case of our family, where we are interacting within that unit and helping them to grow and thrive. So there's a lot of places where we can see how this can influence the way we are as human beings in life. Now, we started off looking at our background and what is within that. Another piece of this puzzle around our blind spots come in with things that we get within our environment. So the good thing about that is that we have some of these things sort of permeate through, and we might think it's part of our personality and may or may not be, depending on how tightly we hold it. And that's typically the way I think about whatever it is that I attach to my own inner being, my identity, is how tightly I hold on to it. So if I'm going to hold on to something very tightly and it changes, that's most probably going to shake my identity to the core. Whereas when I hold on to it very lightly, it has a different effect, a different experience for me. And a way to explain this is, for instance, when we moved from South Africa to New Zealand, now for any immigrants or people that's ever moved from one country to another, making the other country home, that experience can be quite jarring. And the reason for it is because we were a fish in water. We were in our little pond, whichever country it is that we came from, and we were thrown into a different pond, right? And this pond, the water's color is different. It tastes different. There's a whole bunch of stuff that's different about it. Yeah, there's still water. It's still usable. We can still function in it. But it is strange. It is different to what we are used to. And thinking about that, so having that experience for me, I needed to decide for myself how attached I wanted to be to the pond I came from. So my South African pond, I needed to decide, okay, so how much of that pond do I want to keep? And how much of that pond didn't I want to keep? It's so looking at what is useful for me to thrive as a human being and have a life worth living, and what isn't. And as soon as I started holding it lightly, it made it a lot easier for me to go, yep, this is useful, this not so much. So I didn't take the whole pond and said, yes, all of this is me. I sort of started to pick and choose what I wanted and what I didn't want. And then I also started to notice how me going from that pond in my new pond is actually impacting the people or fish around me, and experimenting with what the impact is in my point of view, in their point of view, and how that might be different, and how we can build on the difference and not see the difference as a divide. So our blind spots give us the opportunity to bring more richness into our life. And that is where, for me, feedback, and I know in the leadership space, this is always a contentious topic, because some of us like to give it and receive it, and others don't. And it's really around how it is that we think about it. So for the people that like to get feedback, typically we have found from Dr. Carol Dweck that they have more open, growth-minded approaches to feedback. And they want to grow, they want to learn, they want to discover what it is that they did wrong in order to improve on it and make it so that they don't necessarily get it right the next time, but they are better than when they started out. And people that are typically more prone to not enjoying feedback as much are people that typically have a bit more of a fixed mindset around that space. In saying that, we also have the advantages of getting feedback on our terms. So making sure that when we ask for feedback, we ask it very specifically in order to get the information out that would help us grow in that specific area. Unsolicited feedback will still give us some information. And before shutting it down, because I know that is everybody's first response, think about the 10% of value of learning we can take from it, even if it's only 10%. And then evaluate and see whether it is something that we want to change, because it's a blind spot that we might not have seen before. And normally we do have a tendency to have higher emotional reactions when it comes to a blind spot. It sort of feels like the person or the situation caught us off guard. And it is because it was a blind spot. It's something that we didn't even consider might be a threat to us or might have an impact on us. So getting to understand our blind spots better and developing ways for us to actually look around and see those different things that before we didn't see. Explore the edges of our bubble. Really get clear on what sort of pond am I swimming in? How does it look to other people? If I haven't gone to a different country, so I don't have the exposure to sort of go and evaluate my water that I am in, the easiest way is to ask others that came from different other ponds to get to know, what do they see in my pond in comparison to their own? How is it different? What is or isn't working within it? Because then I get to grow, then I get to see different perspectives and not be blind in those areas. So that is our lesson on blind spots for today, and that all-important roadblock that will definitely hold us back when we are trying to improve in our self-awareness as well as in our overall development. As I mentioned before, you are more than welcome to go through our archive and have a look at all the other lessons that we have around blind spots as well as leadership. You will find more in-depth resources in there. And if you do not like Googling and scrolling through all of that, you are more than welcome to get in contact with me. And you can do that via my email, which is mariska@journey2discover.com. Or alternatively, you can link up with me via LinkedIn. Send me a private message and we can start our conversation. I would love to hear from you, and I hope that you will start also exploring some of your blind spots and growing every day. Until next time, bye.